3, 2.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Anchorage Design Week. There we go. My name is Johnny Hayes, and I'm the Chief Design Officer here at the Anchorage Museum. And I would like to welcome you today to Anchorage Design Week's program in partnership with the Alaska Design Forum. Before we get kicked off, I'd like to acknowledge the Dena'ina people for whom have been stewards, role models, and knowledge bearers for life in the North for millennia. Who continue to thrive and inspire me to think about ways in which I can contribute to the community here in life in the North. Next slide, please. I'd like to invite you to additional programming through Anchorage Design Week. Extends through Friday evening, again with a partner program with the Alaska Design Forum, and welcome you to participate in any way that you can, as well as the virtual programming here delivered via Crowdcast. Next slide, Cody. Finally, I'd like to briefly recognize sponsors of Anchorage Design Week for helping make programs like this possible. That includes Corvus Design, MCG Explore Design, Envision Architecture, P&D Engineers, RIM Architects, Rodney P. Kinney Associates, RSA Engineering, American Society of Landscape Architects, Alaska Chapter, BBFM Engineers, Bettisworth North Architects and Planners, Cornerstone General Contractors, Davis Constructors and Engineers, KPB Architects, SALT LLC, Spark Design, Stantec, and Think Office. Thanks again for contributing and supporting Anchorage Design Week and the community at large. It's an important moment for us here in Anchorage to connect globally with design partners, as you'll see today, as well as have fun and intense moments for inspirational purposes to advance our community in many different disciplines. Finally, I'd just like to thank the Alaska Design Forum for continuing to put on great programming. They're an important institution and organization within our community, largely volunteer, and the board does really great work connecting us to designers and thought leaders throughout the globe. So I just want to congratulate them on a wonderful lecture series this fall and thank them for their commitment to our community through the lens of design. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Peter Briggs, landscape architect at Corvus Design, representing the Alaska Design Forum. So thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. The Alaska Design Forum is a nonprofit organization of Alaskan architects, artists, designers, and other design professions formed to broaden the range of discussion on design and the environments around us. We seek, excuse me, bad form. We're also humorous too. We seek to provide a hub within the design community to connect, collaborate, and challenge. Responding to worldwide discussions on equity, one of our goals is that in the future, our Alaska design professions reflect the unique diversity of our Anchorage and Alaska schools. I'm happy to say that it's our goal to make it available free of charge to all. We invite you, your kids, your friends' kids, and everyone else to our annual lecture series. Please spread the word. To help us in doing this, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. There's a fair number on the next slide, so I'll just hold that up there for a couple seconds for you to see who does sponsor and enable these design conversations where we can bring in speakers from around the world to not only show us what they're doing, but to engage with us and to reflect upon our Alaskan environment. And with that, you're here for a particular reason. If you move to the next slide. I'm very pleased to introduce Miriam Shevland. You've likely already found her bio, so I'm going to share some critical information about her. If you switch to my camera, it will include subtitles for a few items where translation might be appreciated. So Miriam's go-to lunch is cheese toasties. I'll hold it up there for a couple seconds so people know what cheese toasties is, or I guess plural. I asked her what her first concert was, and she said Crowded House, and it's still her favorite band. She went to a concert at a basketball stadium in Tassie. Hold that up there. There we go. Her and her friends were hanging around on the bleachers after the concert, and the band members wandered out. So Miriam yells, "Hey, Neil." And he responded with, "Come down and meet us all." The band signed a $5 note for Miriam, which she spent a few weeks later on mixed lollies at the shop. There's that translation. She was 15 at the time. Miriam supports Amnesty International and the World Wildlife Fund. Consider helping her with that if you feel so inclined. Her firm Play Street also does a lot of pro bono work in Hobart for charities. A couple of weeks ago, she designed a garden for a men's shelter for Salvation Army, which was built in a day by the local church. Lastly, I'll read this as a direct quote from Miriam regarding a humorous anecdote when I asked her what her friends might remember about her from university. I did attempt a pastel presentation drawing for a project, and it was held up as an example of a medium to never, ever use again. I was teased for the whole degree over that one. Before we head over to Miriam, after her presentation, we have some prepared questions that I'll use to interview her with, and then we'll open it up to questions through the chat window. With that, the person you've been waiting for, Miriam Shevland.
Hello, I'll just start sharing. Whoops, can everyone see that? Can everyone see my screen all right?
I'll speak for the masses, I can see it.
Oh, yeah, okay, great. Sorry, I forgot there wasn't people talking to me. So, Ya Palingana, welcome through your screens to Tassie. Ya Palingana is our Tasmanian Aboriginal language, Palawakani, and that's welcome. And I would like to begin by acknowledging our traditional custodians of Lutruwita, Tasmania, and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Our acknowledgement to country is, I've put it over a slide of Kunyanyi, which is the mountain that sits in Hobart. It sort of nestles the city between, the city nestles between the mountain and the river. So it's really lovely. It's a backdrop to our city. Everybody looks to the top of the mountain to read the weather every day. It's an iconic landmark in our city, and we all love it very dearly. So I thought I'd start with where we are, Tasmania. We're a little island at the bottom of Australia. I've done a little graphic there just to show people size in terms of where you are in Alaska and where we are. We have a population of about 500,000 people. We're a temperate climate, even though everyone in the rest of the country thinks we're really, really cold and freezing all the time. We're actually it's quite a lovely temperate climate. So we don't get snow on the ground here. It will fall on the mountains, but it will never, fall on the ground. So, and we just had your temperatures up there, which we Googled. So we're assuming they're correct, but we're definitely not as cold as you guys. Living in Tassie is a pretty unique experience because of its island nature and its size. There are a lot of different types of landscapes that are really easily accessible. So you can see in the top left-hand corner, that's our Bay of Fires, named because of the orange lichen that's all over the rocks up there. It's quite stunning, and the white sands and really, really pristine, beautiful beaches. About 2 hours north of Hobart. And then if you go another 2 hours left, you're in the mountains. So this is Cradle Mountain, and it's a World Heritage Area. So really incredible landscape. And then we have rainforest, half an hour from Hobart, and more beaches and lakes. And it's like a great big playground. So people that grow up in Tassie go to these places every weekend. So we're very much an outdoorsy type of people, and it influences heavily our work because we just are exposed to so many beautiful different types of landscapes. Just a little bit about Play Street. We were founded in 2013. Myself and my business partner, Carl Turk, we went to a conference on play streets, and we really liked the notion of the fact, that we would turn these streets into play zones when everyone went to work, and we thought it was a really great name for a business, and we do a lot of play, and so we thought it was quite cute. It was memorable. We have 7 of us all together, and we have designed about 150 playgrounds in Tassie. A lot of school work. We do a lot of playgrounds in school, so it's our core business, and we love it. I just wanted to run you briefly through what I was going to talk to today. So I just wanted to have a brief chat about the state of play in Tasmania and its probably, I don't know if it's similar to what you experience in Alaska. It's similar to what's going on in the rest of our country. I wanted to run through how we design play spaces, the process that we go through. And then I've got a case study of one that we've just finished recently in the last 6 months, Kingston Park. And I just wanted to run through how we went about designing that. And then there's a little bit at the end about how some of our details have sort of come about through some of the consultation work we do. So firstly, the state of play in Tasmania. Probably 14 years ago, I was asked to design a kindergarten garden at my children's school. It was the first one I'd done, and my brief was specifically no plastic equipment, no rubber softball, no bright colours. We want it to be natural. We want the kids to be able to explore and play and use their imagination. So I was pointed in the direction of Prue Walsh's book, Early Childhood Playgrounds. So I went to the library and got that out and read through it all, and then was completely hooked on designing these play spaces. So it just sort of went from there, and then one led to another, and then it just sort of snowballed. The image in the middle here is typical of playgrounds that you might see around our state and country and still exist. It's the off-shelf equipment put in a sea of pine bark, softball, and it's a fairly typical sort of style of playground, and especially so going back about 15 years. And then when the change happened, it became a more nature-based sort of style of playground. So the other images are projects that we've done where we have just gone about it. We're still using fixed equipment. There's a really nice mix of some off-shelf equipment, but it's set in more parkland settings. And I guess the way that came about too was that people's lives are changing. Most parents are going out to work. A lot of grandparents are caring for their children now in Tassie, and they're taking them to the playground. So we actually need to accommodate all different types of people in the playground and give them places to rest and sit and enjoy. So they've taken on a different kind of meaning, I guess, in terms of who's using them and what types of spaces we're providing. And it's great. It's really positive, and people will travel a long way to go to a good playground in Tassie. They'll drive 2 hours up to Launceston, which is the northern city, just to use a playground. So they've actually also become quite big business, because then there's coffee shops setting up around them, and they can have hundreds and hundreds of people in them at any one time. So what play is to us, and it is a lot of things to us. And I guess over the 15 years we've been designing playgrounds, it's become more to us as well. Like, it started off, probably more about equipment and what you do in there. And as we do a lot of consultation, and as we've done a lot of that consultation, children and other people have thrown up, all these other different things. So we're getting asked a lot now for calming spaces and healing gardens by children, which is a little bit sad, to be honest. But that's where they are in life, and they're busy, that they're coming to school and they want a place to calm down or get away from. I mean, there's, obviously children love to run around still and play on equipment, but we're starting to get some very different feedback from consultation. We focus heavily on the 7 senses. So we like to talk to the children about their 7 senses before we start designing, which is always really nice to make them understand how they're feeling in space and what certain spaces are doing to them. So there's a lot of different mixes here. Community focused, as I said before, they're becoming places for the whole family to go to now. Educational tools, they're also becoming places that people will take groups of children in to learn about nature. So, and I'll talk about that a bit later on in the talk. So I guess our process and how we go about it starts with the place. And as I mentioned before, because we are so lucky to live in Tasmania, a lot of our work is very place-based. We're dealing in some very beautiful settings a lot of the time, where we have water views, mountain views, they're in the bush. So we start with really trying to get that essence of place, and each one's really individual. And we are also doing a lot of work with the Aboriginal community at the moment, and we're starting to look at spaces as starting to heal them again and use some of their cultural practices, such as the cool burning, where they light small fires to get rid of all the fuel at the bottom in forests and start to heal the land again. And there's been some really interesting stories we've had about habitat coming back into spaces once it starts to become healed. And so we're just sort of starting in that realm with the local Aboriginals, and we're really enjoying it. It's sort of opening up a whole new range of possibilities for us. It's really lovely. Secondly, we always do consultation. So whoever the user group is, we will gear our consultation towards the age group or the type of space they're in. Some of our spaces have been in quite rural areas, a lot of kids on farms, or then we'll have, you know, inner city schools where they really don't have a lot of land. So that's really important to us. We'll spend a lot of time on consultation, and we often get some of our greatest ideas sort of come back to us from the children. And again, I'll show you some examples of that later on in the talk. Then we start with inclusivity. So we make sure that all the spaces in our playgrounds can be accessed by all different types of people, personalities. We make sure that we are assessing the 8 different types of play personalities, which I'd sort of come across in Stuart Brown's book on play, where he mentions the different types of play. So there's the joker, there's the explorer, the competitor, the collector, the artist, the storyteller. And we try to create these spaces so that every person coming to this playground will have something to do and they'll feel comfortable in it. So we are really, really careful that we're trying to get that right all of the time. And then we start the design. So that's where we drag everything in that we've soaked up so far in the process, and that's where we have a bit of fun and start to put the spatial design down and all the rest of it. So, and the storytelling. We like to tell stories through a lot of our designs and give them narratives. So that's our process. And I'll just run through each of those 4 parts to it in terms of Kingston Park. So this was a park that we started 2 years ago. It's in a place 20 minutes south of Hobart, and it was an old high school site. So there was an old basketball court and a couple of ovals essentially left over at the start of the project. The high school had moved to another site. This site was very special in the community's minds. They were all very attached to it because a lot of them had gone to school there. They then used the space to walk their dogs and passive recreation. So when we came to do the consultation, there were quite a lot of interested parties wanting to see that we didn't ruin their lovely old school site. So it was really important that we talked to everyone in that community. And like I said, we started with site. So it's a really lovely site. It's bordered by a Whitewater Creek, which is this really lovely waterway and this sort of stone cliff behind it. But at the same time, it's right next to the city of Kingston, which is, so it's quite urban on one side, and then it's got this really lovely bush feel to the other side of it. We engaged with the local Aboriginals, and we were told that it would be really lovely if we could in some way represent the 9 nations of Aboriginal people in Tasmania. So we thought that by doing that, we could do 9 areas of play throughout the site, and that each area could be inspired by animals and habitats of Kingborough, which is the area. So I joined the Field Naturalist Club and asked them all what were the best animals that we could represent that were local to the area, and also we could work into play as well. So we were given 9 and we went from there. And then within each space, we also worked with a local Aboriginal lady on planting. So she takes school groups to do bush tucker planting and medicinal learning about plants. So we worked with her to thread all the habitat through each of these spaces so that eventually she can take school groups on this walk through the site, stopping at each zone, learning about the plants in each zone. And then at the end of it, you end up in this really beautiful yarning circle. So with a fire pit where you could have an outdoor classroom and you can talk about everything you've learned along the way. So that was another layer that went through into that space, and it was all based on site. The next stage was the consultation process. So and it was extensive. We talked to all the schools in the area. We ran workshops with the kids. We met them on site. We taught them about site analysis. We walked around the site with them. And then we went back and we asked them what they wanted to see in these places and types of, themes that they might like. We then talked to the local community. We even talked to the local dog walkers, because they were probably the scariest group we had to deal with, because they were about to lose their dog walking spot. So every single group imaginable was consulted, which ended up being such valuable information, and it ended up being so useful to work with. And then after the design was done, we took it back to them again as well and asked them if they were happy with it. So, and the majority were, so it meant that when the park was built, there was everyone was pretty happy with what they got out of it. So, and from the consultation process, we had a range of themes, which again, we used the number 9 because we thought that was kind of a nice thread through the entire project. So, and it started with a place for all, so that we started to talk about it's not just for humans, it's, there's animals and there's habitat around this area, and we want to encourage that and not sort of move them and push them out. And we also wanted the children to learn about the habitat and the different types of animals, and so we threaded that through too as part of the education of it. It's like I said, it's a space loved by locals, so we had to be really careful that we weren't taking anything away that they were attached to, and there was a strong sense of place there. And the community in this area were very, very adamant that it was to be very natural experience, and that it would cater to a range of different people. So that's where we started. We then had the themes, and then we moved into the concept design. So, and I'll just go left to right. The other thing that we wanted to do when we were choosing the animals was make sure they related to the types of play. So we had a zone for the babies, so a space that babies could safely crawl around in, soft textures. We've got a beautiful shade structure above it, which does some light patterning on the ground. And so we based that on the animal called the velvet worm. So, and then what we wanted to do with that little velvet worm was bring the kids through like a chrysalis. So we've got this lovely steel arbor that's planted in vines, and then that led into the butterfly zone. So it was the whole sort of storytelling of the worm turning into the butterfly, which then is the toddler zone. And then it moves on from there. So you wander down these different experiences. There's the thylacine, which is the Tasmanian tiger, which is now extinct, unfortunately, but we wanted to use that because we thought that was really important to sort of teach the kids about the nature of extinction and the very real fact that we are starting to lose other parts of our habitat. So we've buried his bones in the sand pit for the kids to discover. So the little thylacine lives under the sand pit. We have a Tasmanian long-eared bat, which became the flying fox. So we had a fantastic sculptor called Ben Gilbert that we worked with from Agency of Sculpture. He's based up in Victoria, and he designed a few of the play pieces in here, and they're really, really beautiful and very unique. So there's a sea urchin that he designed as well. I've got some pictures of that in a minute. The weedy sea dragon is in the water play area. The quoll, the spotted quoll, was in our spinning zone, essentially. The quolls, when they make nests, spin nests. So every piece of equipment in there is a spinning piece of equipment. We have the she-oak skink, which is a little lizard over here and lives in the she-oak forest. So that was all our slides and seesaws that were made to look like she-oak, sort of all scattering above the ground. Again, we got a beautiful artist in to carve us some skinks out of logs. So that was really fun. And then there was a site in the space that was elevated from everywhere else. So we made a giant nest and we put a big bird's nest swing in there, and that's the Tassie Wedgetail eagle. So a big zone, the kids can lie up in there and swing and look over the entire parkland. And then we've got the batong. So they're things, little animals that sort of climb through the trees. So this was our big climbing forest space in here. And then down into this beautiful gathering circle, the yarning circle. So a place to gather at the end of your journey, or lots and lots of picnic shelters all through here too. A lot of people have children's parties and events in here. This was the the leftover court from the high school, I guess. So we call that the youth area, and we've put some skate elements in there and some parkour elements, basketball hoop. There's a graffiti wall. So this is a space for the teenagers, really. So we've just tried to cater for every group of child, also every group of person coming with their children. So lots and lots and lots of seating areas, lots of shade, which is a big one in Tasmania. We have a very hot sun in summer. We don't get a long summer, but when we do, the sun is searing hot. So we have to allow for quite a bit of shade. This was the beautiful Whitewater Creek that I mentioned, and this hasn't gone in, but we hopefully it will down the track. It was a nice ropes course over the creek, which should be really fun. This was a montage that we had done, so you can see the sea urchins and all the slides and seesaws. That's the bird's nest swing in the right hand side. That's another view looking down into the water play area. So that was designed to be like a heap of rock pools and lots of dams and wedges in there, lots of different types of taps. So the kids can dam the water and redirect it. It ends up in a big sand pit. I've had lots and lots of friends ring me and say, curse me for, their children being completely soaked at the end of this time in the park. But I always quite like hearing that sort of stuff. I think it's great. So here's some real images of the park. This is the baby zone that I was talking about. Obviously, it's completely brand new. It's just been constructed, so none of these plants have sort of taken off yet. But this was our sunflower structure, which is meant to do the beautiful patterns on the ground, and then all these soft sort of textural surfaces for the babies to sort of crawl around. They walk through the chrysalis. On the right hand side is our wedgetail eagle nest, so the kids can climb up all these logs. Lots and lots of different grasses all throughout, and some she oaks in that space. This is the sea urchin by Agency of Sculpture. So it's a climbing structure. Inside's a sand pit, but you can essentially climb to the top of this, and it's usually covered in kids. So it's quite challenging, I think. It's about sort of 2.5 meters up in the air. So I think they do get a bit of fun on that one. This is the little jaw of the thylacine that's been buried. I've just sort of half uncovered him. So there's a model of the thylacine bones and a little baby, and the artist even decided he would decide the type of death the thylacine had. So he's put some cuts in the bones where he would have been attacked by another animal. So that was the artist has had a bit of fun there as well. That's a overview of the space. We've even looked after the birds here. We've given them some little, that's a picture of the butterfly, which you actually don't really read on site, but you do from up in the air. So that's the butterfly zone, the toddler zone. And then moving down and around into it, that's the bat. You can see the double-sided bat. So yes, the plants haven't sort of completely grown here. So this will be really lovely to go back in a few years' time and see all these forests. This is a big she oak forest through here. There's about 200 she oaks planted in this space, sensory garden here, so lots of lovely scented plants, and the planting palette's actually really lovely. So it'd be really interesting to go back and have a look at this in a few years' time. This is our spinning zone. So this was modelled on the quolls. They have little white spots on their bodies, so we played around with the textures and the shapes in the rubber, and everything spins in here, and it's all inclusive play. So that's a zone for anyone in a wheelchair. And then behind you can sort of see the she oak forest, which is this one here on the right. So the different types of slides and seesaws, and again, all the lovely she oaks that will grow, hopefully in about 10 years' time, they'll be completely covering that space. We also worked with a copywriter and a Tasmanian artist, Alan Mansell, who actually designed us a print that we then used for each space. So he drew really gorgeous little pictures of each of the animals and then put them into one entire print, and had little ant patterns going all around it. And then we used each of the animal spaces at each of the entrances to each play zone. So they're all named. Each animal has a beautiful poem written about it that we had our copywriter do. So it's really, really lovely poetry with the artwork. So there's these layers in each of the spaces. And then again, like I was saying, the planting all represents the habitat of the animal that we've chosen, except for the weedy sea dragon, because we couldn't actually grow kelp, seaweed in that space. So we've chosen plants that sort of look like it. So as far as possible, we've been really truthful to the habitat. And the majority of plants are Tasmanian endemic plants. So it's really nice. That's the little skink, the wooden skink that the kids love. It's really tactile. He's carved all the little scales into it. Again, you can see all the she oaks that will go up over time through here, and then the logs that the kids are sort of running down and playing on. So that's Kingston. And what I wanted to mention as well through, and I mentioned briefly before, through our consultation with some of the details that we've been finding are coming out of the consultation. And this was an example of a school that I did in Hobart. It was a Friends school. So they're Reggio Emilio based. And I had to consult with a group of kindergarten children who are usually quite difficult to consult with. They don't like to sit still, and they're actually, it's quite hard to get information out of them. So I wanted to approach it in a really different way. And I read them, I bought them and read them, the book by Dr. Zeus, My Many Coloured Days, where each emotion is talked about as a colour. And so I read them the story, and then we talked about colour and emotion. And so then I asked them, you know, when you feel happy, what do you want to go outside and do in the playground? When you feel sad, what do you want to go and do? When you feel angry, what do you want to do? And out of that, I got a lot of information. So they were very easily, readily able to sort of tell me what they wanted to do using their emotions, which was fantastic. And then they did all these beautiful drawings to describe their emotions, and I collected all of these and put them together. One of the girls asked for, she said, oh, I just want some shiny, oh no, sorry, she wanted some bling. She said, can I please have some bling in the playground? And we said, yeah, okay. So we did this creek bed, and we, at the last minute, my business partner and I raced off to the local hardware store, and we found all these beautiful silvery pebbles and glass beads, and we seeded them through the creek bed as it was being poured. So it's this really lovely blue and green and silver pebbles all through the creek bed. And we came back about 6 months later, and we were walking into the classroom, and all around the classroom were these mosaics that the children had made to the creek bed. So they named it the shiny happy thing, and they made it gifts. They did paintings. It was revered. It was such, I mean, I actually started crying when I saw all of this stuff. It was so beautiful. And it had come from that one child wanting something happy and shiny and bling in her space. So since then we've approached consultation, especially with the little ones, in a little bit of a way like that. So we get some, you know, some really different ideas coming out of it. Here's another couple of examples. The children have always asked for these fairy houses. So we've got these great contractors here that are sort of starting to design us these really cute little fairy homes, and they're unique to every school. So they're all different each time they do them. They're just carving them out of wood. Here's a beautiful wooden water feature. So we're getting our contractors now to make our taps up for us. And then these details, this one here on the right, these are just concrete culverts that we get from a local drainage company. So they're really cost effective, and we are just connecting them with carved timber logs. We're getting local artists to spray paint them, or, you know, draw pictures on them. And they're actually really kind of cheap intervention, I guess, in the landscape. So this one didn't cost very much for the school, but the kids really, really like it. So, and this has come directly from children helping us, you know, telling us how they want to play and what they want in there. So again, this is a little doll's house. We were asked for a doll's house. Obviously, when we're dealing in outside situations, they need to be really robust. So it's steel, it's got some timber, it's got some artificial grass, and the kids just come out and bring their little toys in here and play. We've had a lot of different versions of this made up now, with ramps for cars and all kinds of things like that. But the kids I work directly with them to sort of design these little houses. These are the potion making bowls that we're just having carved out of local sandstone, and the children are gathering leaves and all kinds of things and making their potions. This is in Kingston Parkland again, and I worked quite closely with a local lady that runs a nature-based play sort of event, I guess, in the area. And so I asked her what she needed when she took the children on the nature-based play days, and she said, oh, we often make potions. I need a barbecue because sometimes I'll boil the leaves of a plant that we've collected to make dyes that will then, you know, maybe drop some eggs into so the children can see what's happening in terms of the color of the plant. She does lots of beautiful mandalas around, so she told me which plants she needed to make that happen. We've put lots of basket weaving plants in there, so hopefully eventually we can harvest the flax to make the baskets so she can run her activities essentially in this parkland. The image in the bottom left is a space that at a school where a child asked me for a Beyblade zone, which is, not sure if you have them over there, but they're these little plastic discs that the kids put this length of plastic in. They sort of pull them and they spin and they have battles. And so he helped me design a battle zone essentially for their Beyblades. So it's a very smooth kind of concrete circle, and in the middle there's a little depression of concrete. So I had no idea what this was when I first started, and he worked quite closely with me to tell me the exact dimensions, the smoothness, everything he'd need for his Beyblades, which was great, you know, and is used again and again each year by different groups of children. Very simple, but just something really different. And then obviously we have cauldrons and fires, and again, the children sort of just hang their little pots and pans here and make their pretend fires in there. So these are the little elements that we're being asked for directly by the children. The other really interesting thing that's happening here is our census data. When that's collected, it's being studied in terms of different communities, and they're finding, you know, some communities are really poor in literacy and certain developmental areas as well. So what they've put together from that data is a kindergarten development checklist, which is this little set of cards. Now, each card has a certain gross motor group skill that they identify, and they have to check it off. So as these children are going through kindergarten, they're sort of monitored to make sure they're hitting these milestones. And in this set, it explains what you can use in your playground to test it. So climbing stairs, balancing, a whole range of things. So we make sure that in every design, we're ensuring that each of these elements is embedded in that kindergarten so that the teacher can check in a playful, fun way. So that's a really interesting development that's only just sort of come about in the last year or so. And it's changing. So when they've done the census data collection again, and they've noticed changes in these, so they're focusing specifically on different communities to understand and start to fix some of the problems they have. So really interesting, and using our playgrounds as, again, another tool for learning. So, and that's one of our lovely little mud pie kitchen areas, which again, I get lots of complaints from parents of the children covered in mud, but the kids are having the time of their life in that one. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. There's been a little bit of chatting in the Crowdcast chat box off to the side, and encourage everybody. We're just going to do a little bit of an interview for 10 minutes.
Sure.
Please just provide any optimistic thoughts or happy thoughts, or next steps for this, things to share in the chat, as it's also another great place to have a conversation. But with that, we just have probably about 8 or 10 minutes of fun after presentation. So I'm hoping to mine Miriam for a little more insight and focus on her and what she brings to this. So this is where we get all Barbara Walters and hard-hitting deep investigations. So hopefully there will be no crying, but there's going to be no holds barred. So Miriam, first of all, if you could have an extinct animal as a pet, what would it be?
Well, I think I'm going to have to go back to my New Zealand heritage, and I'll go the moa bird, which always fascinated me as a kid. Large flightless bird that looks like an ostrich or an emu.
And Cody, perhaps we could go off the slides to be able to see expressions and arm motions.
Oh, do you want me to stop sharing?
Oh, that would be with you then. Yes, if you would stop
Yeah,
sharing.
sorry.
So the New Zealand moa, and if anyone hasn't ever looked that up, you should. It's a very large and was supposedly very tasty bird. So my next question, I hope that we're experiencing a renaissance for contemplating and implementing the concept of equity. How does that influence your work?
Yeah, we are really, really big on that. In our workplace, for one, we have just done, well, in the past couple of years, we've had a series of workshops with a business coach, I guess you'd call her, on the Belbin team roles. I'm not sure if you've heard of those. They're 9 team roles that you get tested for, and they're essentially thought, action, and people-orientated roles. And you work out as a company where you sit in those roles, what your role is, and then we tailor we tailor everything to what that role of the person is, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So it was actually really interesting to find out, you know, and we were learning, you know, about each other, I guess, in terms of I'm called what's called a plant. So I'm like a creative spark in a business. And then we have implementers, we have closer finishers, we have all these kind of people that then in a project sort of have different roles throughout that. And it was really good to find out what people were, because you know, I had been getting frustrated with somebody about something that and they just weren't able to do what I wanted them to do because they were a certain type of role. So I was asking them to get out of role, essentially. And the moment that we learned what everyone's role was, everything started flowing a lot better. It was like, oh, okay, I start with this, then it goes on to this person and this person. And it was fantastic. And it meant that and we can now sort of tailor when people want to do some professional learning. You know, they can really choose things they want to do in terms of their role and how to strengthen their role. And you get to find out what your weaknesses are as well. So it's really great. So I mean, in our workplace, that's been fantastic in terms of each person. You know, we can tailor different things to each person. We really encourage people to go out and sort of continue that professional development. So we're happy to sort of, you know, send people on courses and things like that. In our work, it's a big part of what we do. And that's, like I said, when we do the consultation, that's why that's so critical, because we talk to the users that are about to use the space, and we need to know that they're going to be catered for on a very even playing field. And so, yeah, no, so it plays a really big role.
Thank you very much. In Alaska, significant focus is in place on universal design, emphasizing both the physical and the cognitive. Can you speak to the challenges and successes that you found within this?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is the starting point of our design. We need to make sure that everyone can use our spaces, and Tasmania is incredibly challenging because it's a very hilly and lots of different levels in Tassie. It's not a flat. We do not live in a flat city. It's sort of straight up and down. So we do have a lot of challenges trying to work in, especially pathways that are inclusive. But we just work and work and work until we can get it. It's really important to us, and we've worked with a lot of people with all different kinds of abilities, and we've just learnt, you know, it's just really nice to design a space for everybody. So it is challenging, and it can be, but you can always usually work around it.
Then you alluded to this a little bit with the talking to kindergartens with an emotion basis, but how we ask questions really influences the answers we get. I once heard a wisdom of not asking someone what they want to be when they grow up, but rather asking them what problem they'd like to solve. When you engage with students and children, what advice or tools do you recommend to get to the fundamentals of what they need rather than just what they want? And you can't speak to kindergartners because you've already answered for them.
Yeah, exactly. No, and that's right. And so every group we consult with has to be really tailored. So obviously high school kids don't want to sit down and do drawings with you, whereas the younger group will sit, and we do use a whole range of mediums. We've done model making before, where the children have designed their own playground out of sticks and leaves and all kinds of natural materials, lots and lots of drawing. Kids love to draw. So we'll get a lot of information through drawings and modelling of clay. We always bring lots of Play-Doh and clays so the kids can just sort of stand there and model, because their ideas will actually come out over time. So if we have a session of an hour or 2 hours, a child might sit in a corner and play around with some clay or drawing, and then you go over at the end and they've created this incredible world. So they just can't be rushed, essentially. High school kids, again, that they are engaged in a different way. And we tailor questions, like you were saying in what you just said. We ask things like, and not necessarily to the high school kids, but some of the maybe younger ones, like what's your favourite superpower? You know, if you could invent a computer game, describe it, you know, where would that be? And that, you know, we've had some really interesting things come out of that before. And often people will say flying, and then you can sort of tailor that back into, okay, well, there's a flying fox, there's, you know, that feeling of soaring through the air. So there's lots of ways you can then string these little snippets of information you're getting through them. So each time we try and up the game, really, for the consultation. So we learn from each one. And I mean, when I started designing, I was briefed by the business manager and the principal in most of my projects, so which was really interesting. I never really got access to the children, and then it was after about a year of doing it I sort of started to insist on it, and I said, well, we need to talk to the children that we're working for, and often they didn't want to pay us, so I was going, I'll come and do it for free, but I need to talk to the children. And now you know, 10 years down the track, that's actually been embedded in brief documents by the Department of Education and Catholic Education down here. And it's become a really, really important part of the process. But we've pushed and pushed and pushed it. And now it's, you know, it's great. And we now run lots and lots of sessions. Lots of the time it's outdoors on the site, so the kids can walk around, especially the older children. They can walk around and you can point out areas and they can go, oh yeah, they're over there, I'd really love a hammock, or that'd be a great place to just hang out. And the older children, it's about having conversations with them and just finding out what they do. You know, what do you want to do at recess and lunch, and how do you want to interact? Do you want to learn outside? Do you need an outdoor classroom for that? So it's conversation as they get older. But we actually just try we throw lots and lots of different things at it each time. It's never the same, our consultation. So we're just sort of learning as we go, I guess.
It's being prepared enough you can be flexible.
Yeah, that's right.
So you allude to people, you know, in the past or otherwise. We're in part a product of all the people that we've been influenced by. Is there someone you'd like to give a shout out to for being an influencer for you?
Look, I'd have to say my parents. I was very blessed with my childhood. It was free range, totally free range. They let me wander around. We actually, in New Zealand, I grew up at the edge of a mangrove sort of swamp, I guess you call it. And we just used to spend the whole day there. Like, they had no idea where we were. It was kind of scary when you look back on it, but also a very awesome childhood. And they fed me a really great diet of Roald Dahl and Tolkien and, you know, all kinds of imaginative stories. And so I have to say that, you know, that's where I got my creativity, being allowed to roam and then given all these beautiful kind of books and stories.
And speaking of creativity, then, I personally love the clever use of words, especially to help people embrace ideas. Could you define and explain your desired impact of child life when you use it similarly to wildlife?
Yeah, well, that was something that we sort of started thinking about when we started our company, actually, and starting to go out into communities and understanding that some children don't have very much or very readily accessed playgrounds. So we wanted to create these areas where they could get from their home to a playground safely. So like a wildlife corridor. And that along the way, there might be like a safe house if they got in trouble, or there might be some kind of electronic thing they could sort of, you know, I don't know. We haven't, it's a theory that we talk about, and we really want to pilot it in a suburb down here. It's just getting traction with council. But essentially, it's a safe corridor that a child can walk from home to a play space and feel really comfortable. There might be little play opportunities along the way, but essentially it's safe, and it gets them to where they need to play.
Yeah, and I'm pretty happy locally in Anchorage. There are others who are working on a similar. There are other people who are working on similar things with trails and routes to playgrounds and such. So maybe they have a new word to use now for being child life. In North America, now we'll get to a little bit more deeper, and some of the questions relate to costs and similar, so we might hit that after the interview. In North America, we often feel like we have really strict design standards that can limit what is constructed. We look to other countries to see what they do, your work included. When you look beyond Australia and Tasmania and New Zealand, where do you find inspiration?
Yeah, no, we find it from everywhere. So we'll look worldwide, and there's, and I couldn't even pinpoint a country that sort of has more than any of the others. But a lot of our parks are, yeah, we gather from everywhere we can, essentially. One of my favorites is Teardrop Park in New York. I really, really like that one. And I think I used, the inspiration from that quite a lot for Kingston when we were sort of, doing some of the water play areas. It's lovely. So, and like you said, it is challenging with design standards and how strict they can be. So and I like to say it to people, it's, I think it was Picasso that said it, learn the rules so that you can break them. So we do work, obviously we push it, obviously that we need everything to be safe, but we do like to push it, and we will work with our playground auditors in terms of, well, how can we make this really, really interesting and have a bit of risk in it, but it's going to be safe, essentially, and it's going to be comply to our Australian standards.
And I think you just hit it, it's risk versus hazard. Risk is good, right. Hazard isn't good.
That's exactly right.
Play design in cold climates adds new complexities like tongue sticking to poles or opportunities such as snow as a play material. While you're not in a climate like yours, if you were to brainstorm, what's one cold climate idea that you would like to float out there during a brainstorm session?
Well, I've always tried to push the fire pit in Tassie. And I mean, we do get cold enough here in winter to have that. And I mean, when I started designing the nature-based play spaces, the mud pie kitchen and the mud pit were just, teachers and principals were going, no way are you doing that in my school. And now that's something that's asked for. So now it's like, I definitely want a mud pie kitchen and I definitely want messy play. So it's changed around a bit. Now, I also started putting the fire pits in early on, and that's still quite scary for a lot of schools. However, a lot also embrace it. So they'll pull out the portable fire pit, the kids will toast marshmallows in winter. I think the fire is a beautiful storytelling, yarning element as well, especially with the Aboriginal culture, and they put the beautiful gum leaves on there and you get smoke. And so I'm still pushing it. I push it every project, the fire pit. I'm hoping one day we're all sitting around fires in our schools warming and,
Sitting around making mud pies beside the fire and then baking them until they're consumable.
Right, and telling stories.
As designers, I think we treasure the times when we did something new and it exceeded our expectations. Do you have an example of that you can share?
To be honest, I think it's the consultation work we do. I think that's been really interesting, discovering what's come out of that. So I get surprised every single time I do that, and with the ideas that come out of that. And to me, that is probably the thing that most surprises me, I guess, every single time I do it.
And then related to that, sometimes design has unexpected results. When users are added to your designs, have there been any amazing unintentional outcomes that somebody did something you're like, wow, I never would have expected that? Yeah,
in quite a lot of them, when you go back and you watch how children are playing on certain elements, and sometimes it can be really scary, like one of the ones I went back on, it was a creek bed, some little decks, like beautiful nature-based play space, and these kids were parkouring over every single element in the space, and I was like, oh, it wasn't meant to be done, that wasn't meant to happen. And I was watching them going, oh God, don't hurt yourselves. But so it's always interesting to go back and see how children are using what you've done, and there's probably every project I go back on and there's something completely unexpected that I just would not have thought they would use it like that for. So
and has anything been so successful for you that the love of it has just worn it out or broken it?
Often, and we were called back to a school we did a few years ago, and essentially we turned back in Tassie about a decade ago. All the schools started cutting down their trees because they were so dangerous. Kids were climbing them, and so we're often turning up to these sites and they're completely desolate. So we're now starting to put the trees back into the playgrounds. Now this was one of them that we turned into a forest essentially, and we had again the creek bed, surrounded by gravels and sands and all kinds of boulders and timbers, beautiful, beautiful play space. We were called about 6 months later to the school, and we rocked up and the kids had just completely dug up the entire kind of gravel area around the creek bed, and they were using the gravel to make dams in the creek, and they were soaked, they were covered in mud from head to foot, and it was a private school. you know, so the kids are in these uniforms of white shirts and the teachers is going, this is just not on. And we were going, this is fantastic. How much fun are these children having? You know, it was a space that we'd been to where there'd been no one in that space when we first started. And now nearly every single child in the school was in there. But yes, it was getting overused. So, and destroyed essentially. So we did actually have to stabilize some of the gravel and sort of fix it up a bit. But I actually really enjoyed seeing it. It was, to me, it was like the kids were craving, you know, something to do like that. And it had almost gone, yeah, too far, but.
And this goes back to your influence, and we're in the home stretch now for questions before we get to the chat questions. So from your childhood, do you have that pivotal childhood memory that influences you?
I think it was just pretty much being in nature all the time. And I actually grew up I spent a bit of my childhood in North America. And I do have very clear memories of Dad, you know, sweeping up all the autumn leaves and then calling us to come in and jump on them, and then he'd sweep them up again, and, you know, lying under the beautiful lilac trees. And it's probably quite sensory. So the smells of the leaves and the lilac and I remember catching fireflies, you know, and trying to make little lanterns out of them, and still that smell was quite familiar to me. And so I think it's quite sensory, and I still feel that quite a lot. And I try to weave that into every design. I want children to have different textures and lighting and scents and sounds and everything like that. So I think that was, yeah, very strong in my childhood.
And then last question before we move to comments is to wrap this up for this interview part. I'd like to have you use this as an opportunity to inspire each of us to help implement what your vision would be for a better world. What should we incorporate in our everyday lives or design lives? Yeah,
well, I mean, I would like everyone to be more joyful and enjoy life more. I tend, and this is probably a little bit frivolous, but I tend to walk around the streets, and again, it's sensory based. And I've been really interested in the whole synesthesia concept. And a friend's child's just been diagnosed with, not diagnosed, just, you know, found out that they see sound, you know, and it's such a fascinating concept for me. So I actually quite like to walk around the streets and when I hear a sound, immediately try and figure out what color that is, or if, you know, or vice versa. Or so I play little games like that. And I think it's quite nice to sort of be a bit more childlike as you walk around the city or wherever you are, and to have a little bit more fun with some of the elements that maybe everyday objects. You know, I also try and think, oh, how could we design those so they're a bit more fun, you know, and think about children walking through our streets and the level that they're on and what they're seeing. And it's very different. And, you know, there's all those beautiful images that you see of little cracks in the ground and someone's done a painting, you know, and the weed is the hair or something like that. I just think they're so fun. And I think that it would be so nice if that was sort of incorporated more in our worlds. And yeah, it would just, I think it's just nice. It's just nice to make people smile more. So I think,
oh, sorry.
You know, a lot of people take life too seriously. I think it would be lovely to have these elements all around our cities that just actually make people smile and remember their inner child, I guess.
So I'll turn that into an Alaskan challenge for any of the viewers on this, is that during your day today, just see if you can find one thing that could be designed to be better somehow, especially in light of the fact that if it could be designed that if someone looked at it, someone might smile, yeah, or just a little bit of whimsy with things. So, you know, feel free to tell. And then not only do you have to find this, but you have to explain it to someone in order to share that idea, because that's where these great ideas happen. So with that, I'm just going to orient myself on some of the chat type questions. And I know one of the first ones was, is there a strategy for where these play and park improvements are targeted, or are they site specific? And I think that this question is from Johnny. So do you need a personal vehicle to get to them? Is access taken into consideration? And does Tasmania or even localities have any park master plans or similar for saying where these are prioritized to service people fairly equally?
Definitely. So most of the councils down here have master plans of where they're locating their parks and the ranges of the parks. So if they're regional, right down to the neighbourhood parks, and a lot of them have done their strategy. And as the budgets come out, they'll choose one of them and do them. So we've done quite a lot of master planning in suburbs, and then they'll get money from the government or it's part of their budget, and they'll ring us and say, okay, that park's ready to go, you know, you can start on that one. Tasmania isn't the greatest place in the world for public transport. It's a bit of an issue here. So yes, a lot of these places you do have to drive to, unless you live in the area. So yes, a lot of it are in walking distance to people that live there, but generally we are very divided sort of city in terms of getting around. So yeah, it's a bit of a pain.
Then the next question is, and you've addressed it a little bit perhaps, Darren is wondering about durability experiences. Are there examples of unique play areas that have not worked, braking, maintenance issues, or some ways, and maybe I may phrase it as lessons learned for you for what not to do again for higher durability? Oh,
definitely, yeah, especially in planting. So often to save money in planting, we'll reduce the plant sizes. We'll get the budget in, the plants will be really expensive, but okay, that's okay, we'll make them tube stocks. And then you put them in and then you realise that they're just getting smashed by the kids. So they all go. So you've wasted thousands of dollars on that. The planting is a big one. So now we insist on temporary fencing in areas just to allow those plants to get up and grow. But yeah, no, we've got lots of examples of, and when we do try and every project go back and do post-occupancy on and work out what hasn't worked or what's worked great, you know, that we'll do it again. But there's tons of stuff. I just can't think off the top of my head what's
and reflecting on what
plants is probably the big one, yeah. Or it's just been destroyed, you know, it just hasn't been durable enough, what we've designed. The detail just didn't make it, you know. Like I've done some mud pie kitchens with cabinets that the kids have just pulled off essentially because they just weren't strong enough. And often it does come down to budget, and you've skimped because you needed to get it into budget. And that's now my biggest thing is that, no, okay, it's got to all be quality. We'll actually remove that item if we can't afford it. We've stopped on that. So it's just got to be, I mean, they do have to be robust to put up with children. Like that's the nature of the playground, I guess.
Yeah. And for those watching, we're at 1 o'clock. We're going to keep the room open just to finish up a couple of questions that people have. You're welcome to stay with us or otherwise. Thank you very much for participating. The video is going to be made available. Johnny has been putting some links and things into the chat. If you want to check them out, do check out Play Street, Miriam's company, and the great work that they do, Instagram, Facebook, or otherwise. And then for the Alaska Design Forum, you can always look at our website to see where this is being hosted. We have YouTube content and those kind of things, but since this is a shared presentation with the museum, we'll figure out how to get this up online. So then back to questions. Chad asks, how does one spark random play amongst adults in public space and in the city streets?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and it's interesting, I think you need to design a space that allows for someone in a small group, but then can open up in a large group. It's like parallel play that toddlers do. It's almost the same concept, but as long as there's people around and there's something interesting happening, and that, again, that's where I think the little interesting things in the city are really nice. We do a lot of public art. That's something Hobart does really, really well, and it's very whimsical, interesting things. So you can sort of talk about it, you know, and there's elements like that. So I think it's creating those spaces where you do feel comfortable as a single person or two people, but that you can turn around and, you know, and there's these conversations that spark. And we have been told it's a very friendly city down here. So I guess it's different in each city, but often people will just start talking to each other in the city for some reason. We had a staff member from Romania and she couldn't get over it. And she said, oh, everywhere I walk, people say hello. She said, it's really weird. And I said, oh, that's really normal down here. She said, oh, if you did that in Romania, people would be scared of you. So it's hard. We work in a city that sort of people naturally start talking to one another if they're sort of sitting in spaces. So I've never really had to consider that, to be honest.
Excellent. Then from Johnny, his questions revolve around funding and partners and really the cash part of making this stuff happen. Yeah, which is always that's always the issue, isn't it? You know, where's the money, how much? Often we feel like we're working on a very, very tiny budget. And so we've had to get really creative with a lot of things because of that, which is good for you as well. But it's also nice to have the larger budgets like Kingston. So that was
a $4 million park. You know, that was nice. We had a lot of money to play with in that one. The funding comes from a mix of places. That one was there's lots of federal grants that our federal government give out that you can apply for. So, and that's where the beauty of the master plan comes in. So some of the councils that we've done master planning for have used the document and the master plan to get the funding. And when the government know that that's ready to go, they're more likely to give it to people. So if the councils are proactive about their master planning, they tend to get the funding. Otherwise, we don't really do too much private development funding here. I know on the mainland they do. So in certain open spaces, the surrounding businesses have to contribute to an open space fund, and that will fund the playground. And there's some really beautiful examples on the mainland of that, and they've had so much money to play with because of that, because there's really wealthy companies, you know, in these city areas. So we don't do that down here, which is a shame, because I think it would be really beneficial to the city. So it's usually government funded, or with the schools are the school system's funding. So public playgrounds, yeah, either council, so local government, or federal government.
Thank you. And then a couple more questions from Sue. Have you ever designed a play area for senior citizens?
Not specifically, but we've put elements in there. So there are some really lovely pieces on the market. Richter Spielgate do play pieces for elderly that sort of help their, you know, with some of their core strength, and there's sort of things like, you know, and some of them are geared towards brain, you know, trying to get marbles and things. They're really interesting. So we've put a few in each play or parkland. So we like to sort of cater to everybody, I guess, in each space, but not specifically. But I would really love to design a park specifically for.
And then as a follow-up of mine for that, with the spaces that are always best when they're intergenerational, is there anything in particular you've done that you think you had a really great success with getting that intergenerational link?
I think the Kingston Parkland's the best example of that. That is, and we've had the feedback we've had from that too, has been sensational. So families are taking their teenagers down there, down to their toddlers, grandparents, like families are going together as a group. So not just the parents and the child, then the extended family are all going down, and they're all spending the day there. So because we've allowed for that to happen, you know, and we've had so many comments back to us that it's been such a, you know, fabulous kind of mix of spaces for that caters to so many different people. So, but we worked really, really hard. And again, that's where that consultation came in, that to make sure that we were actually genuinely providing those spaces. Like, so I think that's been really successful.
And one of our questions is a good, it was already in here, so it's a good follow-up. Does the child play space differ from the adult play space? Should they overlap? And if so, this idea of safe play spaces with kids versus benches and parents watching, and you kind of answered it already, but do you have any thoughts on?
I think they definitely need to overlap. Yeah, I think, and also to encourage the parent to play with the child, you know, to actually encourage play is nice as well. But it's also nice to sit back and let your children play. You know, I've got teenagers now, so I remember what it was like as an exhausted mum with toddlers. You know, sometimes you just want to sit back and have a coffee and talk to your friends while they're off happily playing. But other times you want to join in. So I think when they overlap, I think it works really, really well for everybody. And it's nice to watch children play. You know, it's actually nice to sit back and watch children and hear their sounds. And so I think when it's all mixed in together and all, you know, I like things that are all mixed up together.
Yeah.
Thrown in.
And then I'm just having a look on so I'm not ignoring you, I'm looking at another screen.
You know, you're right, yeah.
One of the questions was, somebody upped the ante for a big question, is what's your favorite playground that you've seen in the world that you might like to go to or that you've been to?
Oh, again, I think it's at Teardrop Park. I'm a big fan of that one. And yeah, that's probably the main one. I mean, I'd like to visit all of them. It'd be fantastic. Yeah.
So I think that's the end of our questions. So I would just love to give you a very hearty thank you for joining us. I like the similarities and a fair amount of what you've spoken to between the Alaskan situation and Tasmanian. You're a little bit closer to the mainland, but I imagine you still have that feeling of separation or remoteness, which really defines things for us. And thank you very much for sharing your Aboriginal Indigenous aspects, because that is an ongoing and new discussion for us up here. So it's really, we're looking to other places with similar context to learn and guide forward and collaboratively move forward. So anything else that you would like to share with Alaska before you get ready for breakfast?
Yeah, that's right. No, but thank you for having me. It's been lovely having a chat. Very, very nice.
Thank you very much. And for everybody, I've got a thing here that says the Crowdcast link that you have used to access this will be ready within a few minutes of the presentation ending. So this will be available to share with people via that link. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll be getting that and getting onto the YouTube ADF channel or otherwise. So Miriam, when everybody else comes into the office, you can show them that you did good. And Carl texted me to say that you said no one could come into the office because you're in an office, you're in an open workspace.
That's right. We've just had 3 walk in, and Carl's here too.
waiting off to the edge. So I'll wave to everyone there. And again, thank you very much. And I believe that I'm closing this out unless Johnny or Cody have anything to add. With that, we'll give you a big remote country, similar location type thing wave. Bye-bye.
See you from the future.
And everybody, please stay tuned or